In this video, I'm going to compare gloss, satin, and matte varnishes on both a dark and medium color background. I'll be using this flat synthetic haired varnish brush for this demonstration. I like this brush because it eliminates bubbles and helps get a thin, even coat. Let's start with the gloss varnish. Some artists, especially artists that paint with darker colors, tend to prefer gloss varnish because it really saturates those colors. The downside of gloss varnish is that it's shiny, so when light is reflected on the painting, depending on the angle that you're viewing it, some details could be obscured. Now I'll do a blend of gloss and satin varnish. Gamvar varnishes are kind of cool because you can mix them to a custom finish. So you could do 2 parts gloss and 1 part satin, or 2 parts satin, 1 part gloss. You get the idea. Now let's just do the satin varnish on its own. Satin varnish is semi-glossy and saturates color, but not as well as the gloss varnish. It also doesn't reflect as much light as the gloss varnish. You might be wondering why it's not as shiny, and that's because Gamblin, the maker of Gamvar varnishes, adds beeswax and silica to both the satin and the matte varnishes. So Gamvar is actually a synthetic varnish, and it uses the resin Regal Res. Only Regal Res is used in the gloss varnish, whereas beeswax and silica, in increasing proportions, are added to the satin and the matte varnishes. That's what gives these varnishes their slightly cloudy appearance. Now I'll do a combination of the satin and matte varnishes together, so this will hardly have any shine. One thing to remember if you're using either of these varnishes is to shake the bottle very well beforehand, because the ingredients can separate. The last varnish that we'll test is matte varnish on its own. Matte varnish doesn't reflect the light, but it can also dull colors. Some artists will use a matte varnish for paintings with lighter colors because the dulling or the cloudiness won't be as noticeable, or they might choose to use a matte varnish when their art is getting photographed because there won't be any glare on their art. You might have noticed that all of the varnishes look shiny when they're first applied. This is normal. The varnishes will usually dry within 2 to 3 hours. The gloss dries fastest and the matte dries slowest. This photo was taken 2 hours after I varnished. And this view shows the varnish 48 hours later. On the bottom row, I did a second layer of varnish, and you can see that it's shinier regardless of whether it's matte, satin, or gloss. Gamblin says you only need 1 coat of varnish, and that will offer excellent protection. But you can do 2 layers if you want a glossier or a more pronounced sheen. Here's a bird's eye view of the different varnishes in daylight. Feel free to ask any questions below, and give this video a like if you found it helpful. Thank you!